Nicole Frolick, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It was a joyous experience with you and everybody else and the Waves of Light gang and the N5D gang for that matter on the Brilliance of the Seas Royal Caribbean Cruise, the Waves of Light conference that happened this past January, going from Tampa to Cozumel, Mexico. So glad I decided to go on that. That was the first ever cruise I've ever been on in my life. And well, I will not be able to go to the Waves of Light event in this upcoming January. Well, you say you won't be able to attend that either. I'll definitely keep the Waves of Light crew in mind, and hopefully at some point or another I'll be able to attend a future conference because I loved what I learned on that vessel. It was a brilliant experience. Hope I met my dream girl on the sea, but that did not happen. Maybe it'll happen. It's one of the future conferences I'm going to, but because we talked a lot about that, you and the rest of the Waves of Light gang during the dinner about how to find your dream girl, and I don't know, maybe it'll come up in this conversation about any guys or gals who are looking for their girls. Maybe you could give some advice if time permits. So without further
Sure.
ado, I'll first I want to give you the chance to introduce who you are, what you do, and well, actually, if you have any websites, could you let me know what they are? I might as well get them up and use them as a guide. Is it just the Waves of Light site, or do you have any other personal sites that I could get up
Yeah,
to?
my website is inflexibleme.com.
Inflexible Me.
.com.
Okay. Expand your limitless potential. Okay. That. Oh yes, and there's your name. Okay, so I will use that as a guide throughout this program. Make sure I put the link to that in the YouTube video description when I upload this by midnight tomorrow at the latest. And so without further ado, Nicole, your life story, who you are, what you experienced, please be the best primary source that you possibly can be to set the stage for the rest of this interview. I will not interrupt you. You got the floor.
Well, thanks, Andrew, for having me on the show. And it was a pleasure to meet you on the cruise. I know we had some fun conversations at the dinner table because you were at my table for the dinners on the cruise. Um, my journey started when I was a teenager, but it's had kind of ebbs and flows throughout it. I know some people have their awakening in a very quick blast, some drastic awakening. Mine was more of a slow burn with some peaks and valleys in it. And so what I do is I'm an intuitive life coach. I'm an author, and I'm the co-host of the podcast, the Enlighten Up. And my journey started when I was a teenager, 17 years old. I had just come back from spending 3 months in Switzerland on an exchange program. And when I was in Switzerland, the family that I was staying with, had taken me to a lot of different churches. And I wasn't, although I was raised Catholic, I had a resistance to the Catholic Church. There's a lot of resistance in there. I think within my own church that I went to, the priest I didn't resonate with a lot that he said. There's a lot of fear used to motivate people to do good, and I just didn't resonate with that, and just felt like there were some lies sprinkled in there. And nothing against Catholicism. I think there's great truths in everything, but I wasn't resonating with it. But when we went into these churches, these old churches in Europe, I was really struck with how I felt when I was in there, and I felt like I had been there before in a couple of them. And so when I got home to Canada, I had gone to like a CD store when CDs were still a thing, and I had purchased. I was looking for music, and a lot of the times the way I look for things like my books, music, whatever it is, I let it kind of come to me. Like I let it kind of pull me in, and I don't really choose it. I let it choose me. And I, thought I was looking for pop music, and instead I ended up buying a Gregorian chants CD. And as soon as I kind of listened to it in the store, I knew I needed to get it and bring it home. And when I was home and listening to it, I would listen to it in the bath, or I would listen to it when I was going to sleep at night. And I noticed that to me, it was my first experience with a form of meditation. And I was really liking the way I was feeling. I felt like I was being transported to a different place. I was feeling the music and the sounds of the frequency of the music changing my moods, changing the way I felt, really relaxing me, but also altering my state of consciousness in a way. And so this was kind of what started everything. It kind of kicked off there. So meditation was something that I was never taught. I kind of just self-learned and turned it into my own thing. When I was 21 and still in university, I was 2021, I had sought out a naturopath. And this naturopath ended up being very unconventional in her work, beyond just what naturopathy is. And she became one of my first, I think, big teachers in my journey, because she opened me up to past life regression. We did a variety of different healing methods, such as Reiki, dolphin brain repatterning. She did tapping using different oils, a variety of different things she used on me, applied kinesiology. And so she really kind of opened me up to all these different things when I was 21. And I remember every time I left her place, I felt incredible. I loved the way I felt. It was unlike anything else I was feeling throughout my days, weeks, when I was doing anything else in my life. And she was teaching me about self value, self worth, and self love at 21. So I started this journey of healing a lot of my past, especially with my relationship with my father at that time. And this kind of sparked my journey where I got into massage therapy. I used my massage therapy as a way to connect with the body. I've been fascinated with the body and how we heal ourselves, what our bodies are capable of doing, but also one of my one of my stronger intuitive gifts is visualizations. And learning the body has become something really powerful for me today. Learning the anatomy, understanding what everything looks like on the inside, because I can visually use energy and go in and heal cells, heal certain areas, organs. I know what everything looks like. I know the pathways of the veins, the nerves, everything. And so it's allowed me to do healing on myself and assist others in healing when I'm working one-on-one with clients. And so this massage therapy is kind of what opened me up, started opening me up to understanding, feeling people's energy, understanding that I was an empath and that I felt so much, and then I would use my energy to mitigate situations in rooms, or mitigate the energy between two feuding people, just really kind of coming into all of that. And by the time I was 29, I had kind of, although I was meditating and I was hosting a meditation group at my condo. I was living in Toronto, Canada at the time. That's where I grew up. And we were having these incredible experiences, the five of us, where we would put one of us in the center of the group of four, lying on the ground on pillows with blankets, and we would form a circle around this person and focus all of our energy, our heart energy, towards their heart. And it was silence. We would listen to music, and it would be about 20 minutes long. And what we started to realize, that after, when the meditation was over, we discussed everything that we felt or saw or heard in the meditation. And there were multiple times where we would all start seeing the very same thing in this person's, whether it was a past life, or sometimes it would be galactic lives, things like this. And so I was experiencing this because I also had my Reiki level 1. I was tuned to Reiki, and I had my first kind of experience with a negative entity, actually, after I was tuned for Reiki in my bedroom. It really scared me. And I think I may have shut some stuff down just because I was so frightened by the energy that was in my room that night. But yeah, so through all that, I was working though in the city doing massage therapy, but I was working a lot. I was really consumed with work. I was really consumed with making money, and I was really consumed with the city lifestyle. Despite me also it's almost like I felt like I was living two lives in a way, like I had two split parts of me. And it was starting to cause a really big disconnect for me. And it was starting to wear me out. And I realized that I needed to make a really big shift, and that the city life maybe wasn't what was best for me at that time anymore. And so I decided to move down to the Cayman Islands. I got a job. I was hired immediately to work in a spa. And I moved down there very spontaneously, last minute, and left my life up in Canada, thinking that it would only be for 6 months, but what turned into 9 years. And living on the island is really started to change me as a person. It started to change a lot of my character traits. It started to change some of my lifestyle habits. And it was for the first time, because I was so masculine in my energy growing up, and that it was the first time I started to explore my feminine energy and started to soften a lot of my harder edges. And being around so much water allowed me to really connect with the divine feminine energy. And I started to slow everything down. I started to take time to observe and become more aware. I had taken like a 6 months off of drinking alcohol, and just to kind of, well, I didn't know at the time that I was kind of raising my vibration. I just kind of was following my own internal guidance to, in a way, I knew it might help me connect more. And so living on the island was something that really kind of shifted things for me, but it didn't feel like enough. After a year and a half, I quit my job, and I decided to do something that I had always wanted to do, which was travel for a year and backpack. And so I quit my job at the spa and took the money that I had saved and went on a 2 month backpacking trip to Costa Rica, which is where I think I had one of my biggest peaks in awakening, because I was alone. I decided to travel alone. I didn't speak any Spanish. I really didn't know what to expect, but I just knew I had to go there. I felt such a huge calling to Costa Rica. And I decided to not really make an itinerary for myself other than to start the 2 months traveling with a 10-day silent meditation retreat, also called Vipassana, in the Costa Rican jungle. And this definitely shifted me in ways that I would have never known would have the impact that they do today. So in this retreat, I had to meditate 11 hours a day, not continuously. We had breaks in between, but the total was 11 hours a day. We weren't allowed to talk to anyone. We weren't allowed to look at someone. We weren't allowed to stretch. We weren't allowed to work out. We weren't allowed to do any major physical activity, even yoga, other than just walking around the grounds. We really were forced to be within our own mind and be the observer of everything that was going on, in the subconscious, the unconscious, like really paying attention to that little voice that you don't always hear when we're so busy with things. And you didn't have any distractions. And it really became painfully obvious to me how much of a monkey mind I had. And on day 4 is when I had the big shift. And the big shift happened during the 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon session, where going into the meditations, it was actually quite a painful, physically painful experience for me, because I was so inflexible. I had been really athletic all my life, but really very, very extremely inflexible. Like when I went to go bend over to touch my toes, I barely got past my knees with my fingertips. And it had always been a point of, well, it was something I really didn't like about myself. And sitting in a cross-legged position for 2 hours at a time, multiple times a day for 10 days is extremely excruciating on the back, on the knees, on the ankles, on the hips. There were times my legs would just start shaking uncontrollably, like I couldn't stop them. My feet were constantly going numb, and I get pins and needles. My back was always sore, like I just wanted to just lie down somewhere. And it was just very hard to focus on meditating in silence when you physically have a lot of pain. But this was part of the training, was to be equanimous in our attention, in our observation. And so I had to learn to not give more attention to the areas that were painful and just give equal attention to everywhere in my body as we did this meditation. So experiencing pain was a given. Like it was bound to happen in every session, except for this one. This one on day 4, I went into meditation, and it was a 2-hour meditation, but it felt like 10 minutes. I experienced no pain throughout the entire meditation. I remember being in this state of consciousness where I was no longer in my body. So I had kind of left my body. I felt like I was pure energy. And I also remember time falling away. So space and time really fell away from my awareness. And I remember the one thing that was so ever present with me was that I was so content with everything around me, everything about me, I was just very content with it. I didn't feel like I wanted to change anything at all. And that was a very foreign feeling to me. I was always wanting to change something or make something better, or, always focusing on what isn't right or what could be right. And so this was a very foreign place for me to be in observation for 2 hours. And again, it really only felt like 2 minutes or 10 minutes. And when they rang the bell to signal that the meditation was over and to come back into the awareness of the present reality, I burst into tears instantly, like sobbing tears that I just couldn't stop, like uncontrollably, like my whole body was heaving. And no one can talk to you, no one can come up to you. And I just remember waiting for everyone to really leave the room, and I was there by myself and just crying and crying, and I couldn't understand why I was crying. I couldn't understand it at all, because I had just experienced one of the most blissful places. And when I say blissful, it wasn't of pure ecstasy. It was just this idea of pure contentment, of not wanting to change anything and being completely accepting of everything how it is. And it was the most magical place of feeling to be in. And so I couldn't understand why I was crying. And so when I finally got myself composed and I got up and everyone had gone to the dinner hall to have dinner, I decided to go for a walk around the grounds. And I walked around the grounds through the gardens, and I just was taking my time, walking very slowly. And I was guided towards this tree, this bush with flowers on it that was quite tall. I'm 5'10", and it was taller than me. And I was just guided to stop there and just observe the flowers and the trees. And as I was doing that, this hummingbird came in and went into a flower right in front of my face to get the nectar. And I watched in astonishment, because I'd never seen a hummingbird that close before. And it fluttered in front of my face, taking the nectar out of this flower for at least a minute, just really only being inches away from my face. And I was just in awe, and I observed it, and I just enjoyed the moment. And then when it left, I was kind of like wondering, like, that was interesting. Why did that just happen? And I realized all of a sudden, it just kind of hit me that what I saw, this beautiful hummingbird, and the flower represents feminine divinity and beauty, and all like just the most goddess type energy, that I realized for the first time that hummingbird showed me that I realized for the first time in my life I felt beautiful. And I had never known what it was like to really feel beautiful. And a lot of people wouldn't understand that if I told them that. They'd like, how is that possible? And when you are so consumed with everything that's wrong with you, our minds go to the deeper, like the stuff that's really programmed into us, into the subconscious, into the unconscious, the stuff that we don't realize that has been shaped into our minds through traumas, through experiences, through pains, all these kind of things. I couldn't believe that I had never felt this way before. And that was sad to me. That was sad to me in a way that I was like, wow, you've never known what it's like to feel beautiful until you're 31 as a woman. And I also realized at the end of the 10-day silent meditation retreat, and that the reason why I had been crying so heavily when I came out of that state was because I realized it was the first time I felt like I was home. And I hadn't felt home until that point. And so this return to home, return to self, return to the essence of who I really was, or am, I should say, what became the the point of everything I was now wanting to do with my life. It not that I was trying to achieve it again, because I knew I didn't have to achieve it, that I already was it, but more of like what needs to be peeled away in order to experience this fully. Like there's stuff here that's in the way. And so this journey through these next 2 months in Costa Rica, I was really going with the flow. I was allowing myself, who was very structured, very always needing to be in control. I was very much a type A personality, always liked things to go my way. I was learning to not have everything planned and not have so much structure, to allow things to come into me and what would happen if I did that. And so I would never plan my accommodations more than 1 or 2 nights in advance. I would never plan where I was going to eat or who I was going to hang out with or what I was going to do. Like I kind of really just allowed myself to allow opportunities to flow in and say yes or no to them. And one of the things that started to really flow into me as I started to make my travels around the country was this idea of doing yoga. And yoga was one of my most hated activities because I was so inflexible and I couldn't understand. I was like, oh, I really don't want to do this, but why is there a part of me that really does want to do this? I'm going to look like an absolute idiot in the yoga class. It's something I'm horrible at. And as someone who is a high achiever and really used to being good at like athletics, I was always like either a team captain or, on all these sports teams. For me, doing something that was an athletic type thing and to really suck at it was just crucifying my ego. My ego just couldn't handle it. But I knew I needed to do it. And so I decided that every town I would go to, I would do yoga and I would put myself in a really uncomfortable position and just allow myself to have the experience without any judgment. And what happened is I started to learn a lot about myself because, again, I go back to this connection with the body. I've always had this fascination with the body. And my body started to communicate to me through the yoga. I started to get messages from my higher self through my body. And epiphanies would happen in certain poses, and like these light bulb moments would happen. I started to realize that I was gaining insights and um, um, breadcrumbs or nuggets of wisdom that I had that were just coming to me instantly. I didn't have to seek them out. They could just pop into my head, and like aha moments about things that I had wondered about my life for years were all coming in as I started to allow myself to just experience something that I was really uncomfortable with. And I started to learn a lot about myself, and I started to learn how much I held myself back through my own mind, and how my inflexibility of my body was a byproduct of my inflexibility in my mind and not allowing things in. So me kind of really pushing myself to be more flexible and be more in the flow of how I was traveling completely shifted me in understanding what was able to come into my life, and started to transform who I was and how I was operating in this life, and how I was starting to take opportunities and not shut down opportunities and capitalize on all of the benefits that I was not allowing myself to be privy to or aware of because I would be so rigid in my thinking. And so this really catapulted me into where I am today. And it was that time off, which it was 2 months in Costa Rica, and then I would go and travel to other places. I went to Bali for a month. I traveled through the US by myself for a while. I went to Europe. Like I did a whole bunch of stuff traveling, and then would take time back home in Canada and just kind of rejuvenate, recover, and then go out again traveling. And this year off gave me the fundamentals of everything that I do in my coaching now. It helped me understand so much about my own journey, which I know when we look at our own journeys, our experiences may be unique and different, but at the end of the day, we're all learning very similar lessons of self-worth, self-value, self-love, and learning to be authentic and to live our truth, to speak our truth. All of these things were coming up through my journey, and I started to understand some of the basic fundamental principles around it based off of my body teaching me through being inflexible and my mind being inflexible. And so, hence why my website is called Inflexible Me. Uh, and so this just kind of opened me up, and I went back to the Cayman Islands after that year and a half off or so, and started working. And eventually, I opened up my own company down there, and I struggled with money. I was, even though I had learned a lot about self-worth and self-love, I was still in the baby steps of my journey. And so around 2014 is when I finally was like, enough. I need to shift my life because I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck anymore. I don't want to live like I'm in a place of lack. And I was struggling trying to get my business off the ground after 2 years of really like letting it grow. And so I booked a session with this group, a channeled session, and it's in this session is actually I put the transcript in my next book that I'm going to be releasing, because it changed my life. It was 15 minutes. It was $150. The reason why they charge that kind of money for 15 minutes is because money is such a huge trigger for everyone. And it's a trigger to let us know, like, where are you going to spend your money? Where do you put your value? What is worthy for you? And they trigger you to say, like, how much do you want this change? And I knew I wanted this change. And I was like, I'm going to get it one way or the other. Like, I'm ready. And so this 15-minute session changed my life, because what they shared with me really opened my eyes to how little I still thought about myself, how little I was valuing myself, and how that was showing up in my world, how that was showing up financially, how that was showing up in intimate relationships, all of that kind of stuff. And they gave me homework to do, um, that took that was set for 9.5 months that I had to do every day, and I couldn't miss a day. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because I really discuss it in my book, and it's really inspired my next book. But I had to commit to 9.5 months of something that a lot of people would find very uncomfortable, and a lot of people wouldn't do. In fact, every time I ask my clients to do it, no one wants to do it, and no one has done it to this day. But it changed everything. In fact, within a month of me doing this homework that they gave me, so to speak, my finances started to increase dramatically. And it wasn't because I was promoting myself or anything like that. People were just finding me. Business was just exploding for me. Like, people were like, oh, I referred you to this person. They've got a business and they want to use you solely as their contractor for this. And I couldn't believe it. Everything was changing. And so where I went from kind of living paycheck to paycheck, by the time I left the island, I had grown my business to a 5-figure a month salary, or income. And I was only working 25 hours a week. And so I had learned to honor the things that were very important to me, which is flexibility of time. I like to have a very flexible schedule. That's more important to me than money. But also that I was able to build a business that honored my work. Now, mind you, although I was doing work that was of service, it was massage, it was yoga, it was nutritional stuff, it was personal training, it was all that stuff that I know has benefit to people. I still wasn't doing what I really wanted to do, which was coaching. And I knew I wanted to coach and do life coaching since I was 25. But I always felt like I was insufficient enough to do that because I didn't have a degree behind me. I didn't have a piece of paper that said, you are now valuable enough, you are good enough to go out and charge money for your services. That's ultimately what happens when we go to school, is that we're going for that certificate and that training that we can then tell the world, I am worthy of your money to pay for my services. And that was something I had to overcome, and I had to break through that. And so I decided to walk away from the business that I, after like years of struggling, finally like got it to a place where I was flourishing. I walked away from it and left the island, moved to the States, and started an online business of intuitive life coaching. And I published my book. I published my first book within a few months of me leaving the island. And it just really then started my YouTube channel, which again was very hard for me because speaking was something I was not very, public speaking was probably one of my greatest fears. Um, Probably because I just believed that I didn't have anything to say that was worth listening to. And speaking my truth was something that I had a lot of trauma around from past lives, from being put into solitary confinement in one lifetime for speaking the truth, for women's rights. Also, in the 1500s, I was I was murdered for trying to speak out against a king with someone else, and so I carried all of this trauma. It was in my cells, it was in my DNA. And even though I so desperately wanted to speak and start my YouTube channel, because I knew it's what I really wanted to do, I was still getting blocks. And finally, I got some healing, I got some energy clearing through the throat chakra to clear that out so I could start. And I just started. And eventually, like, my YouTube channel started to grow, and I started to put out videos that were what I've always wanted to talk about, which is anything to do with the spiritual journey, the journey of self, understanding all the things that are unseen, the intuitive, the psychic stuff, the cosmos, different planetary life, different beings, entities, all of that stuff I was fascinated in. I wanted to talk about it and share my perspective and share what I had learned. And so, yeah, that's kind of like where I am today. And then, of course, Andrew, going on the cruise, I decided to host the Waves of Light cruise, so that I could help people get together in a safe environment and listen to some great speakers, do some activities together, go to the Tulum Mayan ruins for a meditation ceremony where we could help heal the land and release trauma. And that was great. You know, that was kind of one of my first major events that I'd put on, and I was really happy with it, and really happy with all the people that seemed to come to the event. Everyone was great. It was a pleasure to meet everyone. And now today, I'm really focusing on my intuitive life coaching, and I've started a program called Alchemy, which is a play off of Inflexible Me, because all my next books are all on plays on that titles. And so Alchemy is a subscription program that I created for those who want kind of a coaching or are interested in growth but don't have the money, so to speak, to maybe pay for 1 hour sessions or bulk sessions, anything like that. That they can get group coaching, get access to understanding the information that, or so not the information, but the energies of each month, the planetary alignments, how that's influencing our own growth, how that's influencing certain traumas to come to the surface, why we're experiencing what certain things we are, why we're being challenged with certain aspects at that time. I put in guided. I do a new guided meditation each month that gets archived in the program so that people can have these meditations to help them heal or awaken or activate. Either sometimes they're activations, sometimes they're just healing, sometimes it's just relaxation. I also doing timeless readings, because I also do tarot cards, and I do a timeless reading for the group where I get specific messages that are for people in that group. And it's a really fun program, and it's a safe program that I created so that people can come in and start exploring their intuitive gifts and start talking about the things that maybe they're too afraid to talk to about with their friends or their family. They don't have anywhere to share all this stuff, and they want to learn more and they want to grow, but they don't know where to get that. So it's all kind of there. So I'm really excited about that program. And that's kind of where I'm at today, Andrew.
Very unique life story, to say the least. And regarding the stuff that you gave in your presentation, you gave one or two presentations at the Waves of
One,
Light
I gave
conference?
one.
Okay. Well, you're more than welcome to give abridged version of that presentation right now. I don't remember how long it was, how much talking time you had there, but whatever the topic was, please discuss, touch on that, and everything else that you said. Might as well give you the chance to give an audio version of that, if visual presentation, if there was any visual stuff with it too. Um, was there or was there not?
Not really. I just used a flip chart where I was just drawing. I just drew
Yeah, I thought I
the yin
saw
and
that.
yang symbol to talk about the feminine and the masculine.
Now that you bring that up, I
Um,
do remember that. Yes.
yeah.
So, with that being said, well, yin yang to discuss feminine and masculine. Okay, well, that's something that we could talk about like crazy on this show. Well, I'm not going to digress and interrupt my guest and not let my guest speak. So you got the floor now. Why don't you talk all you want about this?
Well, the feminine and masculine energies and harmonizing them together for union of the self is one of my most passionate topics. I'm really passionate about the feminine and masculine energies and helping people understand what they are, how you integrate them in your life, and how being out of balance in them is holding us back from really achieving everything that we've really wanted in this lifetime. Really getting the abundance, getting the happiness, the joy, the peace, all of that kind of stuff. And I talked about the masculine and feminine energies and the void of the polarities, which is in between the masculine and feminine, and how why we're here on this planet, like what it's all about. Because in the spiritual community, there's a lot of talk about this. This topic is very common, rightfully so. It's very important. But there seems to be this idea that when we're here, that we should always be in this void of the polarities and to never experience the duality. And ultimately, I use the yin and yang symbol to show how that little squiggly down the middle is kind of like the void. If you were to draw like a path around that would be like the void of the polarities. And when you exit the void, you're either going to one side more feminine or one side more masculine. Now, with the feminine and masculine energies, what's important to understand is that there are two aspects to each. There is the wounded feminine and masculine, and then there is the wild feminine and masculine. Now, the wild feminine and masculine is what we are intended to always be. It is the birthright of your masculine and feminine energy. It is what creation is. It is its true essence form. But the wounded is what we experience all of our trauma in. It's where we're in the more painful parts of the masculine and feminine. And so, for instance, wounded feminine is manipulative. It's very hyper emotional, hypersensitive, victim mentality. The victim archetype is the archetype of the wounded feminine. The wounded masculine, the archetype is the perpetrator. And so wounded masculine energies are non-communicative, what's the word? Very aggressive, and basically controlling, abusing power, that kind of thing. It's very like wounded masculine. Now, it's important to understand we all have the masculine and feminine energies within us. So we can, at any point, be in wounded feminine and or wounded masculine at the same time, regardless of your gender. And so why we come to this planet, the reason why I did this presentation is to understand that, yes, we do want to move into the void of the polarities to find the balance, but oftentimes we're working within either a few lessons at a time. Maybe there's one really big one and a few minor ones that we're learning these lessons. And once we learn them and we reach the void of the polarities, our job isn't just to stay there. Our job is then to go back out to the extremes and learn the next lesson that we need to within those polarities and find our way back to center. And so we're constantly kind of going in and out. And that's the natural flow of energy. It's the feminine and masculine energy of constriction, which is feminine, and expansion, which is masculine, right? Feminine energy is all about going internal, going inside, and the masculine energy is all about expanding, going outward, talking, where like feminine energy it's silence, it's communication with the divine, it's communication with spirit. Our masculine energy is how we communicate verbally here in this reality. And so my whole talk was about the importance of understanding that yes, we are always here to find the void of the polarities, and it's really nice to be in the void of the polarities. But if our job was to only be in the void of the polarities all the time, we probably wouldn't be down here on Earth, because Earth is like one of the hardest places to live, and it's truly like a hard knocks down here. And when you come to this planet, you're coming to learn hard lessons that are not easy at all. And so if you're down here, like kudos to you, because you've signed up for something that not a lot of souls sign up for, to come to this planet, because it's pretty damn hard. But there's so many lessons here to learn, and you're learning really hard lessons, and you can't learn them in the most valuable way until you go to the polarities, the extreme polarities, and then learn how to get yourself back to center. And that's what this whole experience here on Earth is about. It's about how do you find your way back when you're in the extreme. Okay, because when you're in center, it's really easy. You're there, you know, and you may go out a little bit, whatever, but it's really easy to get your way back. But when you go out to the extremes, it gets really difficult. And that's where you learn a lot of the really hard lessons that get completely imprinted into your consciousness, within your cells, within your DNA, and you carry those lessons on. And many times we're surrogates for our star families who aren't incarnating down here, and we're experiencing this, and they can feel it on they can feel it on their own empathic level, the lessons that we're learning, and get to learn some of the lessons through us. But of course, the lesson is most learned when you're actually experiencing it in the physical experience here down on Earth. And so that presentation was about understanding the void of the polarities, the beauty of it, but also the beauty of being in the extremes. We can turn, life is about perspective. It's the one thing I learned in yoga. The reason why we do a headstand is to flip the perspective. Nothing changes around you, but just your perspective of it. All of a sudden, everything's upside down. But it didn't change. The only thing that changed was the way you're looking at it. And so you can change the way you look at these polarities. You can see them as like, oh, I don't ever want to be there, because that's like really crappy, because then like my ego's out of whack, and then I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm in a lot of trauma, and I don't want to be there because that sucks. Or you can be like, wow, when I'm there, I learn the best lessons, and I learn like so much, and I heal so much. And so it never feels good when you're there, because you've been somewhere really great before you go there. And this is just kind of what I wanted to talk about in that presentation, what I do talk about. And that's on my YouTube channel. That presentation is available for anyone who wants to watch it and see the whole thing.
Thank you very much for directing us to that. And oh, by the way, I just need to get this out so people in the comments when I upload this don't have a field day with this. I actually forgot to mute my microphone when I lit my pipe, my tobacco mapacho pipe, while before you started talking about that. So before any people get any crazy ideas and think I was smoking crack or pot, no, that was just tobacco pipe. Just wanted to get that out there because I made that mistake on a previous show, and one of my recent shows with one of my guests, there seemed to be like a flame lighting at his end. I don't know what he was doing, but some people assumed that he was smoking a bong, the commenter made. So trolls like to have a field day with us in the craziest ways. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. But hey, Babacho tobacco is really good to smoke during radio shows, clear out any negativity that may be around here, and actually helps the message get communicated out, especially with people like you and me talking about far out things that sheeple in the two dimensions don't understand. So it's definitely worthwhile to, I think, to every so often puff up a pipe when we talk about these crazy things. But on that note, I'm glad you got a laugh out of it. But anyway, um, we'll get back to that masculine feminine stuff in a little bit. But of all the things to choose as your web address, Inflexible Me. Now I can relate to this. I grew up playing all kinds of sports. Baseball was my passion for a long time. Played football in high school. Shot put a discus on the track team after I unexpectedly and discriminately got cut from the baseball team by a coach who didn't know squat about how to coach. And I tried many things. Went to soccer camp. Went to a hockey camp. All sorts of things I wanted to give a try at some point or another, and did a lot of stretching around that. So it comes as a shock to me that after all these years, with all the stretching that I did to try to improve my flexibility, I am, for some reason, just not naturally flexible. I mean, I do take yoga, and whenever I do yoga during the sessions, I'm the one that always seems to be like you think you're in pain when you see me in some of the positions, but I'm not in pain. It's just that not flexible enough to do some of the moves. I do have a big body, around 5'11", and only 30 pounds away from the 300 mark. I take a beer belly over a six pack any day. I actually like being fat, as we actually discussed at that conference that we were at when Greg brought that up, of all things. But anyhow, my point is, I don't know if being overweight has hindered my flexibility in some way. And what could it be for those that don't understand this? Like, I don't understand it myself. What could be keeping me from becoming as more and more flexible when I'm trying so hard to do all these stretches and do yoga, and had been doing stretches for a long time, and yet I remember in my senior year of high school during like warm-ups that my coach was telling me, you got to work on your flexibility. If anything, your strength is good for throwing the shot put and everything, but your flexibility could lack thereof could cause some problems for you. So I'm guessing you could relate to this. What causes some people to just not be flexible?
Well, yeah, there are a few things here. For myself, one of the things that I realize is that I have to continually do yoga in order to maintain my flexibility. Otherwise, it's like a rubber band that starts to tighten up again. And I realized that this was something I think I had planned as part of my journey in order to keep me connected with my body. Because every time when I stopped doing yoga for a bit, my back would always go out. And I was like, huh. And so, which, if your listeners are aware of this, the back is often, back pain is often associated with not feeling supported. It could be financially, it could be anything. And when I'm not doing yoga, I'm not supporting myself. I'm not nurturing myself. Nurturing is something I never did for myself. I always nurtured others because I'm an empath. I was a healer. Like I was always doing things for other people. And so yoga for me was one of the things that became something that I was nurturing myself. I was giving back to myself. I was allowing myself to receive something instead of constantly like giving or asking my body of. And so my body gave me so much throughout my life because I was very athletic and performed very well in sports, but I never gave anything back to it to say thank you for letting me do that. And so in many ways, the yoga for me was a way to keep me in gratitude for my body, to say thank you, and to keep me in my feminine energy, which is my natural tendency is to be more masculine. So it helps me be more feminine. Now, one of the other things that I realized, which I would think might be something that you might have experienced, was when I was really going on my journey with yoga, and this was within 4 or 5 months of starting yoga, I decided to go for my teacher's training, which blew my mind that I would even do that because with I already thought I was at the bottom of the ladder in a yoga class in like some city, going to a yoga teacher's training where everyone like feels like they're the best of the best. Now I was really going to be at the bottom, and I was petrified of going there. But one of the things like I realized because I was constantly comparing my body to everyone else in the room, and I was like, wow, they can do so much, and I can't barely get into the pose. And what I realized when I started to slow the mind down, like, okay, stop focusing on the fact that you're not doing it like everyone else and focus on the fact of where your body is in this moment. Your body is here. Your body is able to do this right now. Can you accept it? And as soon as I accept it, I'm like, okay, this is what my body can do today, and I'm okay with it. As soon as I made that realization, all of a sudden my body opened up. Like it was like my body dropped into the pose an inch more. My spine twisted further back and I was able to see further over my shoulder. Like incredible things started to happen as soon as I moved into a space of acceptance of my body and where I was in that moment. And so that it required a lot of awareness, that required a lot of breath work, really bringing my breath into the area that I was stretching. So I used the visualization that I understood, like I talked about in the beginning. I knew my body, I knew what everything looked on the inside. And you don't really need to know that. I just used that to my advantage. And I would breathe, every time I would inhale, I would breathe into the area that was being stretched. And I would let the inhale organically stretch that area. I would actually feel a muscle stretch when I focused my breath going into that area. And then the exhale would be the letting go, and I would relax more. And so I let my body move to this rhythm of breath and bringing in that conscious awareness and allowing the breath, the life force, to actually do a lot of the opening of my body. So that might be something, and that's actually something I've taught really inflexible clients of mine when I was on the island and I worked with them. I had a client whose chiropractor told him he'll never be able to touch his toes. It's just the way his body's designed, and that's that. And I was so angry when I heard that because I was like, wow, that chiropractor just programmed your mind to believe that because he's an authoritative figure. You're likely going to believe him, and now you're going to believe that you're never going to touch your toes when that's just crazy. Of course you can touch your toes. And so I said, unless there's something really structurally like holding you back. And I said, is there anything like, did he say like through your x-rays? And he's like, no, there was nothing structurally wrong. Just said, I'm just one of those inflexible people. And I said, no, we're going to move through this. And I, within 45 minutes of our first session, had him touching his toes for the first time in his life. And he couldn't believe it. And it's because I used the breath work. I used the acceptance. I told him, don't judge yourself. Don't think that you're in, like you can't do it. Just be really accepting of where you are in that movement, in that moment. Use the breath to open each area that we're stretching and just relax into it. Don't push anything. And yeah, within 40 minutes, touching his toes. And so I found that that was really effective with a lot of people.
Well, that's very good to hear, and hope it inspires other people to never give up on your flexibility. There's certainly room for improvement there. So, um, looking at some of the other things we can discuss here on the top posts here on your site, telomeres and anti-aging. This is something that I'm very familiar with. I do take DNA Force from Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. Say what you want about Alex Jones being a fear porn loving buffoon. His products do seem to actually have a pretty good rap. They do seem to work well, and I've discovered that myself. And well, there's DNA Force Plus now, which I will be taking, but the DNA Force, the lesser version, I still have to use up that. And one of the things it does is improve mitochondrial health and the telomeres, improve them, anti-aging, and all that. And well, I'd like you to, for those that don't understand this, elaborate on what exactly the science behind is that telomeres do to reverse effects of aging. If you can keep them healthy, then you'll reverse effects of aging. Also, you say deep breathing and meditation can help. And well, what exactly is the science behind how those supplements? I don't have the bottle near me to read the ingredients, but I'm sure you're kind of familiar with what the ingredients would be in that DNA Force that actually make this make the telomeres heal themselves to, among other things, keep you from aging. And well, one has to wonder, could taking DNA Force actually enhance the codons that have been suppressed by the system of domination and control? I mean, if it's going to enhance the telomeres, then then in turn it would have to enhance the DNA, which you would hope would be able to eventually maybe activate all those codons that are suppressed that are called junk DNA, which really aren't junk. But is that wishful thinking? That's not really what the product is going to do, even if you try to placebo the hell out of it. So I'm asking a lot of questions here, but I think you get what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, okay. Let me start off with what telomeres are.
Okay.
So telomeres are on our DNA at the end of the end of each chromosome. Is think of like your shoelaces, that little plastic cap at the end of your shoelaces that protects it from fraying. That's what a telomere is at the end of each of your chromosome. As we age, the chromosomes shorten. Now, when I say that, aging, I'm going to put air quotes around that, because they could be due to inflammation in the body, things that start to deteriorate your health start to lead to aging. So they've found the correlation that longer telomeres are correlated with a youthful appearance, and shorter telomeres are correlated with an aging appearance. And so I started to do like a little bit of research into this. I had a guy on my podcast who talked all about this. And this is actually this video, the telomeres and the reversing, how you reverse the signs of aging through your telomeres, is my top video. I have like 150,000 views on it. And which speaks to what, like all of us want to look good. All of us want to look better or younger, but rightfully so. Why should we not? I feel like we're being aged way faster than we're designed to. So how do we counter that? Well, there are certain supplements that you can take. So when your cells divide, every time your cells divide, the telomeres shorten a little bit more. They shorten a little bit more. And so eventually, if the telomeres get so short, that chromosome just dies. And that's what contributes to that aging effect. So not only can you slow down the telomere lengthening or shortening, you can actually reverse the signs of aging by lengthening your telomeres. So it's not like if your telomeres are short that you can only maintain that now and you can't get any longer. Like, no, you can actually start lengthening them. And so there are certain products that lengthen, or supplements that lengthen the telomeres. And one of the biggest ones that you can take, the number one, is astragalus root. And the best way that you can take that is in powder form. And you take it once or twice a day. I think it's like a heaping teaspoon in a little bit of water, and you mix it around and you take that. And, on that video, I have a lot of links to a site that you can get it at a very reasonable price. And it's incredible. So astragalus root is one of them. Vitamin B and C are also very important. They also help to lengthen your telomeres. Oh gosh, what are some of the other ones? There was a few in there. Reishi mushroom is one that helps to lengthen your telomeres. And taking all of this is really beneficial to you. But so those are supplements that you can take. And of course, your diet, when you can eat less sugar and things that kind of like deteriorate your health, anything that causes inflammation in your body is going to age you. And so I did a whole video on the supplements, but then I also did a video on the breathing and meditation, and how there are scientific studies that are showing that those who practice mindfulness, either yoga or meditation, had longer telomeres. And they did this study on cancer patients. They did it on women and they did it on men. And it was after they had recovered from their chemo or whatever it was, radiation, and they were in recovery, and showed that those who didn't practice mindfulness had shorter telomeres, and those who practiced meditation, or there was just meditation and then there was just some yoga, both of those showed longer telomeres, and the meditation, I believe, showed the longest. Because the meditation is so good at relaxing the mind and bringing in more conscious awareness into the body. There was just a huge correlation there. I then did another video on the emotional, how your emotions can cause aging, and how you can reverse aging through understanding your emotions and the scale of consciousness. And so they also did scientific studies on this that showed that people who were triggered very easily, were brought into stressful situations through their emotions by very easily. Like, so anything could kind of set them off, whether it was, whatever the situation was, it was stressful to them. That was correlated with shorter telomeres. Longer telomeres were correlated with those who didn't react to stress in the same way, wouldn't allow themselves to be taken into a negative emotional state. And so when we look at the scale of consciousness, which you can find in the book Power versus Force by Dr. David R. Hawkins. This is actually one of the first books my naturopath gave me to read, and it blew my mind because, well, the writing for me at 21 was way over my head, but I understood the scale of consciousness. And when we understand the scale of consciousness from an energetic place and what our emotions, frequency, our emotions hold, anything below the level of 200 is considered destructive consciousness. So if you're allowing yourself to go into fear, that's a 100. That's lower than 200. That's you're in the destructive level of consciousness. If you allow yourself to go to anger, that's 150. If you allow yourself to go to shame, that's 20. 20 is the emotion that holds the frequency just higher than death. Okay, so it's a really low frequency. It's one of the worst frequencies that you can go into. And so when you allow yourself, if you are someone and you're going through life and you find yourself triggered by the news, you find yourself triggered by people, you find yourself triggered by any situation, it's like the world is ending. You're literally aging yourself through your emotional response and that consciousness scale that's correlated to it. So people who were in 200 or above, which is considered constructive levels of consciousness, which starts at courage is 200 and it goes up. There's acceptance, there's reason, there's love, there's joy, there's peace. When you are in those states of consciousness, it's correlated to longer telomeres. So being in these higher frequency or higher states of consciousness and with the emotional states attached to them allows you to reverse the signs of aging and allows you to have control of that, which I believe is why meditation was correlated so strongly to longer telomeres, because when you're in a state of meditation, usually in a very peaceful place, there's joy, there's a lot more harmony there. So that makes sense to me as to why they have longer telomeres. So that's kind of what those three videos correlate for the anti-aging and how we actually have control over that through various ways. You can control it through physical, supplemental ways. Physical activity, too, is also anti-aging. Like if you're physically active, whether it's sports or working out or yoga or anything like that, that's also going to help you with your anti-aging and help you either maintain or reverse or I should say lengthen the telomeres in your chromosomes.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening. Um, Moving down the page here to the next thing, abundance. The money influencer, unlocking your abundance codes and finance and frequencies. Three clips here that I think are worth elaborating on in greater detail. Interesting, the middle one, how the Matrix manipulates sex to lock up your abundance codes, and the thing that's about interesting about that. Well, how do you correlate sex with abundance? I mean, there's a lot of I guess correlations that you can make there, but many people when they look up videos for generating abundance, they don't really see many things dealing with sex in the videos that they would find in their like their search engine and all that. And of course, the thing when it comes to finances and frequencies, I mean, it'd be nice if we had a world where there was no money and we could all have a socialist system where technology was not suppressed, where everybody could get all of their needs and their wants met, and the oil companies would not have a monopoly over everything because, well, we'd have the technology out there that could get us to star systems in a heartbeat, but planet Earth is not anywhere near there yet. And, well, I guess these videos that you've put up here to generate abundance could be thought of as ways to help us get to that point at some point in the future, hopefully the not too distant future rather than the distant future. I don't want to be 99 years old and then find all these things that I've been trying to expose all my life on the shows like this came to light, but not until I was about to become a dead man. So the sooner the better. And well, what advice can you give to help people that are struggling with abundance? And please, for all the people that don't understand this, manipulating sex to lock up your abundance codes. How does that work? Please talk about that too.
Yeah, let's talk about that because that's great. So what a lot of people don't realize is that your major creative centers are your sacral chakra, the second chakra, and your first chakra, the root chakra. How you manifest in this world is not actually through your higher chakras, it's how through your lower chakras. And when I say that, I mean manifesting physically. Okay. Yes, you do the work in the higher realms and you do all that, but to bring it out into this physical world, you use your root and your sacral chakra. Now, we actually have abundance codes within the sacral area, in our second chakra area, and they're there. And a lot of the elites who practice occult practices and rituals and all that know this. And so they've used sex against us to cause trauma in this area to lock up our abundance codes. So if you've ever had any sort of sexual trauma, whether it was, it could have been rape, it could have been just touching, it could have been just something in that area, okay, that just in a bad experience, or whatever it is that you felt used or anything like along those lines creates trauma in that area and it locks up your abundance codes. You start to freeze up the energy in the sacral chakra. And this is something I'm very familiar with because it's what I went to my naturopath for when I was 21, because I had experienced some trauma in that area. And so, and it's actually something I'm still healing today. Like I mean, I'm healing now on a much deeper level, this area. So it's something that I realized there's a huge correlation to when you start to heal the sacral and root chakra areas, heal the traumas that are correlated to that area that you've experienced. It could be in this lifetime, past lifetimes. The trick is that whatever's happening in this lifetime is likely happened in past lifetimes, and you're repeating it through cycles. And so you don't necessarily need to know what's happened in your past life. Sometimes it's good for context, but just trust that if there's something that you're feeling here right now, you can heal it here and right now and have that cross all time and space. And so understanding that sex has been used against us in the way of the more promiscuous you are, treating your body that like it's just frivolous, you can give it to anyone, porn, all these different things that actually freeze the energy in this area. Movies that are really highly sexual, but like, you know, you think of 50 Shades of Grey and all that. I thought that book was so great when it came out. And then the more I started to understand myself and my body and my worth, and I started to understand like how everything worked energetically, I was like, wow, that book is so destructive to our consciousness. And it's been infiltrated into so many like women's minds of thinking like it's just like this women's power and this is great. And it's just totally the opposite. It's trying to move the feminine into destructive masculine energy, like wounded masculine energy. And it's just wrong. Like it's not helpful to you in understanding the sacredness of the sacral chakra and how your abundance is so tied to that. Sex is a beautiful experience. When you orgasm, it's one of the highest points in experiences that you have that you can create something. It's one of the greatest. If you can use your energy of your orgasm, especially when it's with someone you love and you cherish, and they love you back and cherish you, using that energy of the orgasm can you be used for high purposeful manifestation. And we're taught to be ashamed of it. We've been taught to be disgusted by certain things of our body. And there's just so much crap there to freeze everything down. And so in that video, I talk about how you can unlock your abundance codes and why the Matrix has used sex against us to lock them up. I also talk about money triggers a lot. In fact, I'm releasing a video tomorrow morning on money triggers, and this is very common, especially in the spiritual community. This idea that money is a bad thing. Money is not a bad. There's nothing bad about money. It's just a form of transaction, currency. It's the intention that you put on it. It's simply just energy, but it's when you put an intention on it that isn't in alignment with the purity or creation that was meant to be, then it starts to take on different forms. But that's not the money that did that. That's the person who had the intention that did that. And so learning that money is, when we change our perception around money, which again starts when we start changing our perception around ourselves. Okay, when we start to flip the perception about who we are, understanding our worth and all of that, money starts to lose its power. And it just becomes something that we can create or magnetize towards us to live a life here on earth, because that's what we use right now. We use money. And sure, it would be great if we didn't have money and, free energy technology was released, but we're not there yet. So the only way to beat the system is to change your perspectives around money and change your energy and intention with money. So once you start changing that relationship, you start to cultivate a new energy around it. And when you cultivate a new energy around it, you start to break down the old systems of the greed and the power that was put on it, and the destruction that was intended for it. We can start to break that down through our own ways of using our abilities to change our perceptions, change our energy, change the way we use it, and change our relationship with it.
Right. And I might as well ask you this. It's become kind of annoying, this whole global currency reset might happen next Tuesday thing. It's really getting annoying. And the excuse they
Sorry, what
always,
did you say?
the global currency reset,
Oh,
Nassar RV might happen next Tuesday, as James Gilliland likes to joke around. Well, he likes to joke, but it's not really a joke. It's getting flat out annoying. And it's really disturbing me that the excuse we always get is, well, the bankers refuse to surrender. Is that really the problem? Or the people that are supposed to make this manifest aren't doing a hard enough job to make it happen, so that we won't be slaves to a banking system of fractional reserve banking anymore? I am scheduled to have Benjamin Fulford on my show in the not too distant future, and certainly this will come up in conversation when I have him on, because he's talked a lot about this with the Asian dragon families and all that. But um, the idea that we need to, in order to ascend and get to higher consciousness, the ultimate ball and chain, I see this way, is to get the fractional reserve banking system out of us. Because as long as they loan us money that doesn't exist and charge us interest on it, that makes debt and inflation unavoidable. And I can't see how we can move through higher ascension as long as that ball and chain is on us. Now, the idea that we could switch to a gold standard as a stepping stone to maybe after 10 to 15 years or so, once we get on the gold standard, then 10 to 15 years of trying to work with everything we got to move to no money at all, well, that would be nice. But I was just looking at the Wikipedia page for gold standard a few days ago. I know Wikipedia can't really be trusted, and one of the last things it says in the intro thing is, studies show that the average American would not benefit if our currency system were changed to a gold standard. Well, I can't help but think that there is some brainwashing to that, and I can't imagine how money that has intrinsic value is not better off for society than money that does not have intrinsic value. So I might as well ask you this: what do you see regarding the future of money on planet Earth, and do you think there is any hope of what does humanity have to do as a collective if they actually expect this thing to get rolled out, so we won't be slaves to the banks anymore?
well, back in 2016 is when I really started to um, pay attention to the global reset stuff and follow it, and follow all these people who were saying it's going to happen, and then like, oh no, and no, no. And I realized it was another trap. Whether it's going to happen or not doesn't matter. It's another trap within the system of being attached to an outcome that you feel you have no control over. And I don't like that. And I don't think that's helpful to anyone here. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't going to be a global reset or anything like that. Sorry, excuse me. So I've got a bit of a dry cough. Um, but the reality is that I've understood is that Everything in your reality is a projection of your own hologram. Okay, when we get into quantum physics and quantum manifestation and all those ideas, 0 point energy, you are the creator of your reality. And as long as you hold on to this belief that you can't ascend until the global reset happens and that this money is released that will help all of humanity and clean the planet and do all that, as long as you hold that belief, you've completely limited yourself from all other possibilities that could happen. That's just simply one possibility in a scheme of infinite possibilities when we think about quantum physics, okay, and quantum realities, that I chose to exit that whole conversation many years ago because I found it destructive. I found it not useful to me to be attached to an outcome. And it was destroying my relationship with money as well. Like I didn't find it helpful. Maybe it's not the case for other people, but just for me, I just didn't find it helpful. I didn't like that I felt like I needed this to happen in order for me to ascend or for everyone to ascend. And, the reality is that you could already be ascended and still be here on planet Earth. Ascension is simply a vibration. It's you transcending the 3D vibration and moving into 5D and holding it. Now, this idea that you are bound here by money or that somehow your freedom is attached to money is another program that's been programmed into us that we need to break free of. And so there's so many things around money and this idea of the global reset that really, to me, are constructs of more programming to keep people feeling enslaved, to keep people locked into an outcome that may never happen. We don't know if it will or it won't, but it could. But why hold on to that reality? Why not open yourself up to infinite possibilities? Why not open yourself up to other possibilities that are greater than that could happen that we're not even conceiving of yet because the human mind is so entrapped in that kind of thinking that we just can't even open that up. And that's where this whole idea of like inflexible me came from, and understanding the mind. It was like, oh wow, there are so many possibilities out there for me that are so infinite. Okay, moment to moment, when you think about the particles of energy and how your emotions, your mind, everything is affecting every timeline that you could possibly be on. Okay, and which timeline are you going to be on? Because you can be on a different timeline than someone else that you're living in the same household with. Okay, just through your own control over your thoughts, your emotions, your deeds, everything that you do. When you understand how powerful you are, all of that stuff doesn't matter anymore. All of the stuff outside of you doesn't matter. If you want it to be your reality, it can be, and then sure, you can do that. But it's gonna lock you in and make you feel enslaved. And I don't want to feel enslaved to anything. And so I focus on creating a reality around myself, focus on my own energy, and change my relationship with money and my perception of it so that it's not in line with all this other stuff. And I use the matrix to my advantage. Yes, you can exit the matrix and all that, but exiting the matrix, part of that is actually using the matrix to your advantage. Like, how do you make it work for you as opposed to you working for it? Because you can reverse it. You can reverse the energy completely. And so that's kind of where I put my focus on. So I don't really follow the reset. I find it's like an energy vacuum, like it's a vortex of energy that's not something you want to be in.
Well, fair enough, but at the same time, when you want to undergo ascension, and I actually noticed I skipped over the ascension thing and went all the way down to the abundance thing. Well, maybe that was a good thing because we kind of need to. Ascension may be the cream of the crop among all the topics we're discussing. Save it for near the end. But the thing that you say you don't really want to focus on these things to try to get closer to your infinite potential. Well, to what extent is the expression "you're only as strong as your weakest link" true in this regard? Because if you see that some truth in that statement, then one might think that it is in our best interest to actually be not worry, but be at the very least somewhat concerned about those things that are a ball and chain around our ascension, which I said earlier is the fact that the bankers loan us money that doesn't exist and charge us interest on the loans, which makes debt and inflation unavoidable. To ignore that is tantamount to like putting your head in the sand, as the old ostrich cliche goes. So would it not make sense from a standpoint of you can't ignore your weakest link? You want to ascend, you have to address this, and worst case scenario, you have to fight fire with fire. But let's hope you don't have to go that route. If you don't want to go that route, what routes can you go to fight your weakest links to implode the matrix and do ascension hacks and all these other things that you apparently touch on in these videos that you have on ascension?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Andrew. So the way I see it is when we think about the scale of consciousness, something I didn't talk about in the scale of consciousness is what a lot of people don't realize is the power that they hold when they're in higher vibration to make change in the world and from an energetic point of view. So when we think about the scale of consciousness, when you are at the level of, I believe it's, okay, 200 is courage. I think 310 is acceptance. But at the level of 310, when you are resonating at that level, you have the ability, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to counteract the negative energy of 70,000 people in destructive consciousness. So you as one person, okay, when you hold that vibration of just 310, okay, we're not even into love yet, like, which is 500. But when you're there, it's I believe it's 70,000 people. When you get up to when you get to love, which is a level of 500, I believe you can counteract when you're in that state of consciousness, okay, and you're holding that vibration of love, you have the ability to counterbalance the negative energy of, I believe it's 750,000 people. Okay, so these quantum leaps that happen as you go up. It's what's called a logarithmic scale. Okay, in energy. So bringing this back to the power of you as one person and this idea of your weakest links, you could focus on trying to change the weakest links and how you have to do that. And I understand in this physical world, we must take action. We can't just, be in our minds and meditate everything away. I don't believe that at all. I believe you need to walk the walk and talk the talk in this reality of the change you want to see. And that's exactly it. So when you can hold a high vibration like love or joy or peace, enlightenment, which is 700 to 1,000, is the highest. And that was able to counterbalance, oh my gosh, I want to say 10 million people. But when you're in a higher place of consciousness and you're living from that place of consciousness in all that you do and all that you say, okay, even if it's for 2 hours a day, okay, within that time frame, you are counterbalancing so much destructive consciousness just from you doing you from that place. We have to be the models of the change in our lives to see the change in other things. If we can't be it, we can't expect to see it. And so we only have control over ourselves. We don't ultimately have control over anyone else. Okay, now we can influence things, and how we influence that is by being the model. And this I can say from a smaller scale is, for instance, with my dad. My relationship with my dad has changed dramatically since I started really putting myself out there spiritually and really kind of blasting myself out over the internet. Well, this is what I do, this is what I think, this is what I talk about, and growing up, I was always the conspiracy theorist in the family. I was always talking about things I started with health and other things and the government, and everyone just kind of laughed at me, rolled their eyes, and oh, Nicole, here you go again, saying all that stuff. And so I learned, as most of us do, and I'm sure most of your listeners do, know that we just can't talk about certain things with people like that. And So I just started doing me though. I stopped worrying about what he thought, or I stopped talking about it with him, but I would meditate when I was home visiting my parents for lengthy periods of time. I would meditate every night for 2 hours upstairs. I would be out in the garden. I would just be sitting out there and relaxing, and all the birds and the animals would like flock around me. Like the chipmunks would be around me. The birds would land on my chair. Like, my dad would come out and he was like, Cole, how come all the birds are around you, but when I come out, they like scatter? And he would ask me, he's like, are you communing with the trees? And then he started asking me questions about like consciousness and the universe. And I'm looking at him going, my God, is this my father? And at first I thought he was he was trying to make fun of me. He was trying to bait me into a conversation to make fun of me. So I was giving very short answers. I wasn't really giving him too much information, but then he just kept asking more and more questions. And I realized, like, is he really interested? And I realized he was becoming interested. And then he started having his own experiences where he was communicating with his parents who passed on 40 years ago in his dreams. And they were giving him addresses and information, and it was blowing. His mom was communicating with him, helping him find things in the actual like physical, like his waking consciousness. And he was asking me about like, how did this happen? And I was like, oh, that's your mom. And like, and he was just stunned. He was shifting because he was observing me and my shifting. I didn't say anything to him. I didn't tell him anything that he had to do. And this is the impact that we can have on a global scale when we focus on our own ascension, our own journey, our own traumas, healing, raising our vibration, like, raising our awareness, like all of those things. You have no idea, but being the model and being true to yourself will have much higher of an impact than anything else. And so, the more of us that do that will start to shift the timeline of everything else that we're hoping for. So if you are hoping for that timeline of the the reset, then focus just on yourself and really moving into that space of what energy would bring that about. And not focus on that outcome, but focus more on the energy and the emotion and how you live that out in your day to day. And you watch how things start to change in your physical reality around you. Watch how people respond to you differently in ways that you never thought they'd respond to you. Watch opportunities come in that you've never seen come in before. That's what I've experienced.
Well, that does open up a can of worms, and I do have some questions on that I'd like to discuss. Before I do, though, ask those questions, that thing you said about your father waking up, I can certainly relate to that very much in the case of what's going on in my household at the present moment, with a father who wants to be the ultimate sheeple and a mother who is better, but not greatly better, only slightly better, willing to listen to me, but still there's a part of her that has a ball and chain that keeps her in the matrix. But there's been some things going on in my household, among other things like a crystal that I had and a rock that I brought from the International Yoga Festival in India that I was at. They both broke, and I asked my family members and the housemaid too, you guys do this? And they said, no, we didn't. And not only that, there was also something that I bought off Alibaba.com, which is basically the Amazon of China. I'm not going to say what it was, but it was a much cheaper price than what I could get at the local area here in Pennsylvania. And my parents were very skeptical about that, saying you really can't trust anything from China. I'd rather you not do this. Well, before I could even consume the product, it disappeared. And naturally, I was going to make my parents and the housemaid suspects again. They asserted they didn't steal it from me. I did pendulum readings to see if they took it from me, and the pendulum suggested no, they are innocent. And I'm thinking, well, the only other possible explanation for this has to be kleptocratic entities of higher consciousness, which I know are around me because, well, I've had things disappear before. There's the disappearing object phenomenon, and one psychic who's the wife of a guy who runs a business that I bought some like EMF chips from I called him after some of the things disappeared and said, if your customers complain about their things disappearing, and well, he put his wife on the phone, who's a psychic, and she was channeling my paternal grandfather on their side, and he said the entities are taking it from you as a way of saying, well, we're here for you, Andrew, and you don't have to waste your money on these things because, well, we'll do the work for you. And why would they take something from me that could have actually saved me money in the long run buying it off China's Alibaba website when I would ultimately spend more money here in Pennsylvania and breaking my stones and all? I mean, it's not a big deal. I can just and I have two more additional stones, and I'll just put them in different parts of the house. But if my family members and the housemate are telling the truth that they didn't do it, and I know I didn't do it, could the entities be doing it? And what reason could they have for doing it? Well, could it be that they're doing it because, well, they know that I would love to see my family members wake up? Because anybody who's listening to my show knows for that I can't stand people who refuse to believe the truth because they can't handle the truth, or refuse to believe evidence that's in their face because they it goes against their paradigm. That drives me nuts. Well, could the angels actually be saying, we sympathize with you, Andrew? We're going to wake these people up some way or another. So we're going to take things from you as a way of waking them up so they will have no choice but to acknowledge that their son, Andrew, is right about these things being stolen. Maybe I'm going off the deep end, but does this make sense in any way?
So I have a couple things to say to you about this. Um, okay, let's just talk about the things disappearing. What my experience is with things disappearing is that when you had them, you were in a different timeline and you enter into to a different frequency that doesn't allow for that product to be there with you. So you said that these products were of lower quality, they were cheaper, but they were of what you could afford, right?
Well, that was just the thing from that I bought from Alibaba.com, the Amazon of China. The other things that disappeared were like EMF chips that I bought to put on some my cell phones, the electronic devices. Those were the things that my the psychic was communicating with my paternal grandfather, who said that they were the ones taking it from you as a way of saying, we're here for you, Andrew, which I came to the conclusion means we're going to protect you. We're going to do the work of these EMF chips. You don't have to waste your money on these things. Now that's different from the thing I bought on Alibaba, which was a cheaper quality version of something that I could get locally. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so you could, I think what the message there that's most important for you in that sense of things missing is what I think the message that they're trying to convey to you is that you don't need anything outside of you to create your energy field of protection. In fact, the stronger your energy field is, the more protective it naturally becomes. You don't actually need to protect yourself from anything. The stronger your vibration is, the larger your energy field becomes, the more you believe in it, the more you are empowered within it, that will be sufficient. That's all you need. Um, Now, the EMF blockers can be helpful when you're not in that state and on all that, but I think the message there is that you know exactly how to do that and you're capable of, and so they want to see you doing that. Now, that's my take on the things missing. I do want to address something else that I don't know if you want me to address.
Why would I
um,
not want you to address it? Go ahead.
I want to talk about your trigger with your parents, or just people not wanting to see the truth when it's in front of them,
Okay.
and how much that's a trigger for you. Because triggers, this is the beautiful thing about triggers. We all have them, okay? We all have them, myself included. And triggers are like beacons of like, look at me, you need to address me within you. So when we get triggered about something, there's something inside of us that needs to be healed or become made aware of, that is kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Zapping our energy, like it's deflating your energy, um, um, life force, I want to say, but also your ability to understand and grow from it. There's a lesson there. And so I, like you, used to feel the same way, and I still do, but I'm not as triggered by it as I used to be. Um, And this goes back to me being in this idea of acceptance. And this is why this is like why the fundamentals that I learned through this year off in Costa Rica and in my body and yoga, it just it goes through everything. When you can learn to accept this, so what is it you're not accepting of them not being able to see the truth? There's something inside of you that you're not able to accept. So what if you could find acceptance of it? Like if you were to actually shift your energy, because there's so much resistance energy around your parents of being like triggered into this, like how can you not see the truth? It's so blatantly obvious. Like I communicate it to you all the time and you just don't get it. You don't get it. What if you were to shift that energy and shift it into, you know what? My truth is my truth and your truth is your truth. And you must not be able to see the truth right now because it's part of your lesson. And part of your lesson is also my teaching. Okay. And my lesson is your teaching. So you're always a teacher and a student at the same time. You could be teaching someone and they could be teaching you. Okay. It always works that way. It's always synergistic. It's always in a flow, that way of giving and receiving. That's the natural flow of energy. So there is something here for you to become aware of, like what would happen, what would shift the energy around your parents if you just became so accepting of them and their resistance to the truth, and say, you know what, okay, this is where you're at. For whatever reason, this is where you are at, and this is where you're going to choose to be, and I'm going to be okay with that. And I'm going to let you do you so that you let me be me. Okay, you see how like there's this like force energy of them, like your dad not wanting to have anything to do with you, but you wanting him to just be exactly like understand everything from your point of view, and he's probably wanting you to like have his point of view. If you were to shift that perspective, I guarantee you would start to see changes in your parents without you having to say anything to them, because it happened with my parents. My dad, who called me a conspiracy theorist all my life, when I was just back home in Canada this past 5 weeks, I literally just got back yesterday. I was floored. I was having a conversation with him in the car, and we were talking about climate change and all that. And he goes, "Do you really think it's a hoax, Nicole?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, these are all the points." And I showed him all the research I did. And he's like, "Oh, wow. Like, where'd you get all that?" And I just like, "Oh, I just researched it." And he's like, "Oh," and he goes, "So, but Nicole, like, there's got to be someone controlling all of this. Like, if people are trying to control, there must be like, who's behind all this? Is there like some group?" And I'm like, I go, "You mean like a cabal?" He's like, "Well, like those people." And I looked at him and I could just tell he was wanting to say like the Freemasons. And I go, "The Freemasons?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, do you think there's like a group like that controlling everything? And they've got their puppet masters and the governments and all this kind of stuff." And I'm just blown away that I'm even having this conversation with my dad. Never thought the day would come where my dad would be talking to me about what, he told me were absolute conspiracy theorists when I was in my 20s. And this just happened because I had an acceptance. I like let him be him. I'm like, I want you to do you, and you think the way you want to think, and I'm going to respect you and love you regardless. And he started doing the same for me. And all of a sudden, just started to shift everything for him. He just starts to waken up. And I just feel like there's a lot resistance, okay? Resistance and persistence. That which you resist will persist. So as long as you keep resisting your father being in this place of consciousness, okay, which you feel is just, basically asinine, considering you're aware of so much. He's got to have the same perspective of you. And when you both keep resisting it, it persists and it persists. So what happens when you let go? What happens when you surrender? You say, you know what? I'm just going to surrender to all this. I'm going to just be accepting of you because I really want you to be accepting of me. But even if you aren't accepting of me, I want to move into the state of acceptance because it's healthier. It frees my energy. It frees me up to do other things. It frees my energy and my thoughts to not be consumed by it. Like there's a lot of value there that I think would be really helpful to you in shifting the relationship with your parents. Like you don't do it to shift the relationship, you do it just to let go because you never want to be attached to an outcome. But you'd be amazed at what can happen. And I mean, my family's living proof. I'm literally living it. I'm seeing it happen.
Well, that's great advice. One of the best bits of advice I've ever gotten. Certainly fitting on the sun moving into Scorpio astrology that we're getting into. I just looked at the horoscope before interviewing you, and it seems like it's very fitting that I get advice like that on my sun moving into that house of mine and all that. Very interesting. So everything happens for a reason. Thank you, Nicole. You have been very helpful with that advice, and I will certainly be taking that to heart, and I hope it does make a difference in the very, very near future. But that does tie into the thing I wanted to ask you about, the thing about the extent to which one can change the world. You did touch that on earlier, saying if you vibrate at this number frequency, you have the ability to affect this number of people. I mean, you can also show that through Mandelbrot set representation. Those who have vibrated the higher frequency would have a larger Mandelbrot set within the bigger Mandelbrot set structure. So the people that have big household names in the truth movement have the ability to change the world at a greater rate than those that are trying to change the world but don't have a big household name and aren't vibrating at such a high frequency. But you did say the thing about how like changing your attitude about money to, well, are you actually trying to suggest that if I were to somehow find a way to quit my day job working as a clerk in my mother's ophthalmology office and found a way to monetize things on the internet? I don't know. I've tried to do that. I've been on the process of doing that. I attended Brendan Bouchard's conference in San Diego about marketing and all that, with the hope that maybe I can find a way to do that. And I don't want to tell my radio listeners you're not going to have to listen to my show for free anymore. I got to charge you. There's got to be other ways to do that. But if I were to find a way somehow to quit the day job, to not work for anybody and make money for myself, even if it does result in me getting a little less money than I would if I was working the 9 to 5 job, you actually suggesting to me that that would actually change the world and make the global currency reset happen? Because I was under the impression that one person can't change the world like that. Just because I figured out a way to make a living not working for anybody, making money myself, does not in any way, shape, or form mean the rest of the world is going to change and have a global currency reset. It's just a drop in the bucket, if you will, relative to the rest of the world, one would think. So to make sense of this, I need to ask you, what exactly are you suggesting when you say that I could change my life? Do you mean what extent of life, the whole world, or just the local area? Or if I were to do this, and, well, would I expect to see differences in the world or the local level? I'm confused.
I mean, yeah, okay. So, I mean, you could do that. That's one way. It's not the only way, and that's a pretty drastic way. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out just because you choose it. You got to choose it every moment to moment to moment to make sure that you're manifesting the timeline of it succeeding. And that's it depends on your belief system. It depends on the programming, and it depends on a lot of things, right? But what I'm suggesting by you changing your life, it's about being the model. So how do you show up in the world and your conversations in every activity that you do? Like, so for instance, if you want to be at a higher vibration and resonate in like those higher frequencies, are you making choices with your body that are healthy? So diet, choosing things like, are you choosing exercise to move your energy in your body and to treat your vessel with respect? These are certain things that you can start with. Are you dedicating certain things to yourself that you're nurturing yourself with? Like for me, it's yoga, it's meditation. Sometimes it's a bath. Sometimes I buy myself flowers. There's certain things that you can do that you're constantly contributing to your joy, your love. These are the actions that I'm taking to change the frequency of everything around me and in me. Okay, it's like when you change the frequency within you and you fill your cup up, you start to change everything around you, and it's just a byproduct, right? Everything that is happening on the inside is reflected in the external world, and so by you choosing you and filling your cup up in many different ways, And that's honoring your passions, honoring your joys in whatever capacity you're able to do right now. You don't have to jump off the cliff and go for like everything, but you can start with smaller things and build yourself up. Changing careers is just one thing. It's a big thing. It's a big step. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but it doesn't mean it's the only way. There are so many ways. How, when you're interacting with people in your relationships, with your friends, with your family, with coworkers, an intimate partner, whoever it is, like, are you shifting the way you communicate with people? Are you shifting the way you listen? Are you shifting like everything about like your thoughts? Are you paying attention to the programming in your mind, the belief systems that hold you back? Are you working to rewrite them? Are you working to overwrite the programming and put in something that's abundant, that's something that serves you, that's no longer distracting away from the things you want to manifest? There are so many ways that you can put focus into changing the way you live, okay, to ultimately change your reality and then effectively change the big global scale. So remember, change has to start somewhere. And I'm a firm believer that if you can't make the changes within you, you can't expect to see the changes outside of you. The changes always have to start on the inside. That's the law of the universe. It's always that way. It's the feminine energy. Everything that's going to manifest in the physical, okay, which is the masculine energy, the outward energy, has to start on the feminine. And the feminine is the inside. Okay, it's the internal, it's the spiritual, it's the emotional level. Okay, and then you start to manifest that through your mind and what you say and what you do and how you show up in the world. That's how change happens. So yeah, those are the ways that I would suggest that you and any of your listeners who are wanting to see the change in the world, to start with yourself. And what are all the ways you can shift? Trust me, there are so many ways you can shift your reality, shift your energy from moment to moment. Remember, moment to moment, every moment you have an opportunity to create more, to vibrate higher, or maintain a high vibration. Like, there are so many things. So that's kind of what I believe.
Yes, and well, I'd like to end shows on positive notes, and we'll try to in the process. But the last thing on your list here on your website here, negative entities, or you're trying to find solutions to the negative entities by looking at the videos here. A couple of things here that stand out here. You say you want to try to stay away from alcohol. Well, you and some of the other people at the Ways of Light conference seem to violate that on the Ways of
No,
Light
I don't say that. I actually don't say that in the video.
Okay. Well, the raises a question though. Um, if you were to drink alcohol, could you, if you were to ask your guardian angel, spirit guides, and source to make sure you only get the highest good from that alcohol, or if you, and likewise, if you were to smoke a joint of cannabis, you don't really have to do it with tobacco, because my understanding of tobacco is it doesn't do this. It basically, tobacco is in a sense many ways like sage or incense, so there's really no need to bless it. But some things like alcohol and cannabis, which opens up your aura to negative entities, which can hijack you, then it raises the question: okay, if I were to ask our angel, spirit guides, and source, and try to put like light on it for my heart soul essence onto the cannabis or the alcohol or whatever the substance in question is, can I expect that I will not have to worry about some sort of negative entity hijacking during the use of that substance? Well, let's start with that question, and then we'll carry on to some other things.
So everything comes down to you and your consciousness, okay? Everything comes down to your awareness of consciousness and how in control you are of your consciousness. And so being present and being very aware and knowing your power behind that, your belief system behind that, affects everything that you interact with in this physical plane. So for instance, with a drink, I could look at a glass of wine and I could think, oh, if I drink this and it's going to lower my vibration, and sure enough, that's because I believe it. That's probably what's going to happen. Now, if I remain really neutral on it, likely, yeah, like alcohol, it's acidic. It's not always interacting with the body in the most healthy way, but there are some health benefits too, like a glass of wine. Like it's not all that bad. Um, it's the mind frame. Now, if I believe, so what this is the way I do it. Um, for me, I enjoy red wine. I really enjoy it. I particularly like it with some food, like a nice dinner or some cheese. And I really like having conversation around red wine. It doesn't mean I always do it, but that's, I enjoy it. It's one of my joys. Like I really do enjoy it. And I know it's one of my joys. And so I focus on the fact that it's a joyful thing for me. And because I believe that, it probably raises my vibration a little bit. Now, I'm also responsible. I don't go and like abuse it and you know, like go and drink like a bottle or two of it and think like, oh yeah, like I'm going to be totally in control. And it's possible I might be able to, but I know I'm not at that conscious awareness. I know that I can have a couple of drinks and not be affected. Okay, if I'm really present and I really focus my consciousness on it. Now, if you're not being in like very aware, you're not being present when you drink, then you do leave yourself susceptible to being um, controlled by the alcohol and then allowing your energy to be opened up and for depending on how much you abuse it for negative entities to use your vessel as like a joyride basically to do things and influence you to do things you wouldn't normally do when you're sober. So yeah, that can happen, but it all comes down to be responsible, know your limits, know what you're capable of, and change your belief system around something. You have the conscious power to shift the energy of anything you're eating or drinking. And you could bless it, you could focus on your intention, you can focus on like your energy with it. There's a lot of things you can do. But like I was saying, like with your guidance coming through, Andrew, about like the EMFs and those being taken and not showing up, like, excuse me, the message there is that you are so powerful. You are so powerful. So harness it. Use what you know. Use the tools that you already have to expand your energy field and be in control of it and maintain your sovereignty. You can still enjoy a drink or maybe it's a little bit of weed, like I don't know, like to each their own. I'm not here to judge. I don't want to go into judgment because that's a low frequency and everyone's got their own journey. But yeah, I fully believe that you can have total control, but I also think you got to use common sense at the same time. You can't be you know putting back a 40 of vodka and thinking that that's going to have good effects on you, like in the long run. So,
Right. Now, one interesting thing about negative entities not having as big an influence on us as they did in the past. I have been listening to some of a lot of Brad Johnson, who channels Adronis, his work, very fond of it, and he's done some recent videos talking about how the moon is not under is greatly not under control of negative entities like it was in recent times. So it's not acting as a ball and chain around Mother Earth's feminine energy to a great extent. And well, I guess I might as well also bring this up. In addition to that, I also listened to a talk that he gave at a recent conference where he was talking about how information that he's getting from spirit suggests that 2037, 2038 is a time of, well, some biblical prophecy could manifest of 3 days of darkness where we all go through the ascension. And I hear this, I'm thinking, oh my God, is this just another guy who channels ETs or some higher level consciousness giving a date where we're all gonna be burping butterflies and farting rainbows, and everybody's gonna be acting like couch potatoes because they're gonna sit back and think, oh my God, this is gonna cause ascension, and we don't have to do anything until then. That's what I'm afraid of. Well, hopefully it's not, but he does say that, well, this is happening, and well, being a radio host, I might as well say something about it. Um, Anything you have to say about that time period, 2037, 2038 being the major ascension transition after 3 days of darkness or so, and also after the Apophis asteroid hits or doesn't hit the Earth. It's interesting how that's supposed to happen about a year after that asteroid is scheduled to hit the Earth if it passes the keyhole in Friday the 13th in 2029. But that's another story. I'm digressing. Do you have anything to say about this, and also the anything to say about the moon, which was a ball and chain around the feminine, not gonna be a ball and chain around us as much as it was because it's the control's been taken away from it. Do you know anything about that?
So my standard now is I don't pay attention to dates because time is a construct that was created, and depending on um, your own like life, whatever, and plus the collective, timelines can be shifted. Like we're in really high manifestation phases right now. Okay, there's a lot of energy happening. And so you can like literally shift a timeline in a very quick way. And so depending on the choices you make, depending on the thoughts that you have, depending on like all these things, and you've added that all up through the collective, it could shift the timeline. And so I don't anchor myself into any dates whatsoever. It doesn't matter who does it. And I tend to respect people who don't give out dates so much. You know, at least with the caveat of saying like timelines could be shifting, whatever, but at the current time, this is the timeline that's most favorable. But depending on this or that, like those are the things that we have to be aware of, that we're shifting things constantly. And depending on what timeline we're in, it could happen, it might happen, like I don't know. May happen sooner, may happen later, may not happen at all. I don't know. But like this idea of getting attached to any outcome and the time of something to me is just, it's a program that so many of us get caught up in and enslaved to. And getting attached to an outcome really starts to tie up our awareness of any other infinite possibilities. So this is something actually I had to grow through a lot. This was a hard lesson for me because I got tied into those dates and all of that a lot. Like that was something I really got tied into. And it's just my own journey that's I backed off of it, and I realized that it's just easier to like be like, okay, that's cool. Maybe if it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm just gonna focus on now and focus on what I can change and focus on my growth and my own journey and um, and being the change and speaking my truth and doing everything that I know I can do right now.
Lovely. So we've almost reached the 2 hour point, so I guess we'll bring this to a close. But before we do, you can get out anything you like now, these last few minutes. Give your contact info, your website. Make a sales pitch out of this. I see there's coaching, speaking, products, and services that you advertise on your site. Didn't really get to go to those pages because I was looking mainly at the home page as a guide throughout this whole show. But I want to give you now the chance to make a sales pitch out of this and talk about what you offer to the world. And everybody's got to make a living, so do that, and any future speaking things as well. So close us out, Nicole. Make your pitch.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, they can head on over to my website, inflexibleme.com. I've got an email there, info@inflexibleme.com. I do intuitive coaching. I do tarot readings. I also do combos of the two. I have quite a few clients that like mixing the coaching and the tarot readings together. It's just my absolute passion, coaching. And no one I coach the same way. I'll coach you according to what guidance is coming through and what I feel is the most opportune way for you to learn and grow from. Uh, and a lot of it is intuitive, so things will come up in through the sessions. So if you're interested in any of that, you can find that all at my website. I also have a program that I talked about earlier called Alchemy. It's a subscription-based program. You can sign up to that on my website too if you're interested. It's only $11 a month. You get a new guided meditation every month. You get a timeless reading. You also get a 90-minute group coaching call with me where I go over the planetary energies and influences that are affecting our healings, our traumas, our growth, everything that's kind of coming to the surface, what we're being challenged with that particular month. You can ask questions, I answer. So it's just an opportunity to get some kind of quick group coaching with me for a really affordable cost. Everything is archived in that program, so no matter when you join, you're going to have access to everything that's been uploaded, and it's always going to stay there. And it also allows you to be part of a community that is really safe for you to explore your own intuitive gifts. I'm helping people to open their intuitive gifts through this program, and someone's mediumship just turned on, and someone's really starting to get information about other people in the group through their dreams. There's been quite a bit that's kind of been happening, which is really cool. So if you're interested in that, and that's available on the website. Of course, I also have some webinars that you can reach through my Inflexible Me Academy that allows you to understand, like, for instance, if you're really interested in understanding the levels of consciousness, I have a webinar on that. Got one on protection, building your field of awareness around protection, mindfulness. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Divine feminine, divine masculine. So if you're interested in any of that, you can find all that at my website. And if you have any questions, just email me. My YouTube channel is Nicole Frolick. I've got a ton of videos there, and I do bi-weekly readings for each month for your sign, whether it's earth, fire, water, or air. And just putting out other videos throughout the month as well that come to mind. And tomorrow I'm doing one on money triggers and clearing the throat chakra.
I guess it wouldn't hurt for me to subscribe to that channel. All right. Great having you on, Nicole. I'm sure I'll see you at a future event. Take care. Namaste. Enjoy the rest of your trek of infinite consciousness. Pleasure having you on. I'll try to get this uploaded by midnight tomorrow at the latest. Take care.
Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.